Hi everyone, it's Megan Reads back to, you guessed it, talk about books. This time though, it's not the best we're talking about, but the worst I've read so far in 2022. Thankfully, this list is a hell of a lot shorter than my 5-star reads, so this won't take so much time to edit and put together. I hope. Just like in the last video, I will not be including any series that I have read, only standalones for now. I'll do a podcast in the future about all my favorite and least favorite series. I am a huge series lover, so that will be a deep dive to get through for me. In this, it's only standalones that I read this year. Now, that does not mean the novel came out this year, just that this is when I finally got my ass around to reading it. I also, before this video starts, I just want to say one thing. I might not personally like these books, but that doesn't mean that they didn't deserve to be written and that these authors are not talented. I am not here to bash anybody's creativity. I'm not here to say that somebody isn't talented. Writing is a really hard thing to do, and putting your work out there for the world to see, and honestly for the world to criticize. I respect these authors, even if I personally don't like what they wrote. I'm a writer myself, and I can tell you it's hard. It's a very hard thing to do, to put your work out there and know you're going to be judged. So I just want to reiterate once again, I don't like these books, but I think there's a market for them. I think people would love them, and I know have loved them. And these authors are talented. That's what I want to say before this video starts, because I'm going to say some things, let's be honest, it's not going to be so nice because I personally just didn't like the book itself. These authors, I respect and like them all. I've actually liked some of their books that I'm actually going to talk about, but these were just not so good to me. I'm so sorry to say it. I just didn't like it. In this video, I will only be discussing 1 or 2-star reads, which I have a few of. I'm not going to discuss anything that is a 3-star and up, because to me, a 3 is considered a good book. I would recommend a 3 to anybody. On until a 5, which is an amazing in my opinion. I'm sorry, I'm getting all flustered because talking about the bad is always harder than talking about the good. The good, nobody can get upset. Nobody can get offended. The bad, totally different situation there. I wouldn't recommend these books, like I said, but I know there's a market for them. And if you've read them, I hope you really did enjoy them. So, as I've just stated again, let's get started with the books I didn't like or hated. And yeah, you heard me right. There are a few on here that I didn't just dislike. I hated. Now, without further ado, let's just jump the hell in here and let's just get our feet wet and get started, right? So number 1, The Nesting. Nesting, sorry, by C.J. Cook. I read this book in January of this year, and it was released September of 2020. There is 416 pages. I've never read a book by C.J. Cook before. I had heard of this book. I had had a couple of friends read it. Honestly, I didn't go in with super high hopes, but I had pretty good hopes. I thought, okay, you know, a 2.5, a 3. I was really thinking a 3, actually, by the synopsis, which I'm about to read to you now. The woods are creeping in on a nanny and 2 young girls in this chilling modern Gothic thriller. Architect Tom Faraday is determined to finish the high-concept, environmentally friendly home he's building in Norway, in the same place where he lost his wife, Aurelia, to suicide. It was their dream house, and he wants to honor her with it. Lexi Ellis takes a job as his nanny and immediately falls in love with his 2 young daughters, especially Gaia. But something feels off in the isolated house nestled in the forest along the ford. Lexi sees mysterious, muddy footprints inside the home. Aurella's diary appears in Lexi's room one day, and Gaia keeps telling her about seeing the terrifying sad lady. Soon Lexi suspects that Aurelia didn't kill herself, and that they are all in danger from something far more sinister lurking around them. See, doesn't that sound like an amazing synopsis? I mean, it really does. It sounds good, sounds intriguing. You know, there's a house, there's a nanny. Nanny stuff always gets me because, you know, years ago, I was actually a nanny for over 10 years. So all of that always gets my spook radar up, because when you take care of kids, lots of things could go awry. So I think that's a nice little plot device. Thought it was going to be interesting. It was not, however. I rated this a 2 star. This book did very little for me except to depress me to no end. The main character is supposed to come off as having a hard time of it lately, and I do see and agree with that. One thing that is not really discussed, however, is how much of that isn't because of her and instead her toxic group of friends and they never get any comeuppance. They never get confronted for being so horrible to her, from her best friend to her shitty ass boyfriend who later becomes her ex during this book, and her mother. I mean, people were horrible to her the entire book. I kept waiting for her to defend herself and go, no, don't talk to me like this, or grow as a character. And she didn't. She never grew. She never stood up for herself. She never got a backbone. And honestly, that was sad to see in a book. It really was. The nesting had an interesting premise, like I said, but somehow it lost me in about the halfway point, and the story began to really fall off the rails from there. It, it was as if the author didn't really know where to go. And they had no idea, like no major outline of the points they wanted to hit. They just knew that they wanted it to end a certain way and start a certain way, and the middle, it was like they were scratching their head attempting to figure out where to go, and it didn't land for me. I'm sorry to say, it just really didn't. I also found the last 40 pages, it really dragged, and when the ending happened, I remember finding myself going, that's it. I thought there would be a bigger payout, considering how much the main character went through in this book. I was left wondering, honestly, why the hell did I bother? Also, I just found the writing pretty clunky and hard to get into and stay engaged with. Number 2, The Reunion by Samantha Hayes. I read this book in January of this year, and it was released in 2018. It has 386 pages. I have actually read Samantha Hayes before, and I actually really enjoyed her book. So I was excited for The Reunion. I thought, this is going to be good. This is going to be a 3-star or a 4-star. I went a little hot. I thought 4. I really did. I thought, this is where we're going. It's going to be great. No, it was a lot of things. Great was not one of them. This book infuriated me. Confused me, confounded me, every word that you can think of that is not a pleasant word for this book. But you know what? Let's get into the synopsis, and then we'll get into all the dirty details of why I didn't like this book. Synopsis. Ready? They were all there the day your sister went missing. Who was lying? Who was next? In charge of her little sister at the beach, Claire allowed Eleanor to walk to the shop alone to buy an ice cream. Placing a coin into her hand, Claire told her to be quick, knowing how much she wanted the freedom. Eleanor never came back. Now the time has finally come to sell the family farm, and Claire is organizing a reunion of her dearest friends, the same friends who were present the day her sister went missing. When another girl disappears, long-buried secrets begin to resurface. One of the group hides the darkest secrets of them all. If you loved Gone Girl and The Girl on the Train, this gripping psychological thriller packed full of twists and turns will be impossible to put down. Now, you might have been able to tell from the way I just said Gone Girl and Girl on the Train. One of the very first crimes of this novel, which I gave 1 star, would be to compare this in any way to Gone Girl and The Girl on the Train. It seems almost criminal, and I'm looking into filing charges. I'm just kidding, of course. Partly, if I could actually charge someone, maybe I'd actually look into it a little bit more. I have read, like I said, Samantha Hayes' previous books, and I really liked it, so I thought I would love this. And what ended up happening was me staring at the book with confusion written all over my face and trying desperately to understand where I was supposed to find the mystery it was trying to portray. These characters, I wish I was kidding. They were all not just bad, not unwell written. They were horrible. And the ones that weren't horrible were just dull as dishwater. Now, I don't have to love a character to love a book. In fact, a lot of my favorite books have characters that are quite repulsive in some way. But in a book where people are trying to figure out a mystery, I didn't care. Not about any of them or what was happening. I found there to be no tension in this book and no stakes of any kind, which made for, honestly, a boring read. Also, it lacked in description, and the ending was laughable, in my opinion. Number 3. I Am Watching You by Teresa Driscoll. I read this book in February of this year, and this was released in 2017. This is 301 pages. I have to breathe a deep sigh for a moment before we even get into this book. Of all the books that I'm going to mention, something about this specific book triggered the hell out of me. I remember talking about this book to my husband and actually yelling at one point how this made no goddamn sense. And when I went online and I saw the reviews, I thought, have I lost my mind? Am I insane? Because everybody, 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars. I thought to myself, is there something wrong with me for a moment? Thank God I eventually found people who thought like I did, so I wasn't crazy. But this is a book many, many people love, and I didn't only dislike it, I loathed it. But let's get into the synopsis, and then I'll tell you why I didn't like it. Loathe was the word I used. What would it take to make you intervene? When Ella Longfield overhears 2 attractive young men flirting with teenage girls on a train, she thinks nothing of it until she realizes they are fresh out of prison and her maternal instinct is put on high alert. But just as she's decided to call for help, something stops her. The next day, she wakes up to the news that one of the girls, beautiful, green-eyed Anna Ballard, has disappeared. A year later, Anna is still missing. Ella is racked with guilt over what she failed to do, and she's not the only one who can't forget. Someone is sending her threatening letters, letters that make her fear for her life. Then an anniversary appeal reveals that Anna's friends and family might have something to hide. Anna's best friend Sarah hasn't been telling the whole truth about what really happened that night, and her parents have been keeping secrets of their own. Someone knows where Anna is, and they're not telling, but they are watching Ella. Okay, let's get into it. I really hated this book. I hated it when I was reading it, and I hated it when I couldn't stop yelling about how this book drove me crazy. And here I am ranting again, bringing the anger and the hate back in rare form. I hated this book. 1 star, and the reason is simply this book just pissed me off. With its generic writing, run-on sentences, and characters that I wanted to bludgeon. It was not a fun time, but might make for a fun bad review now. That's what I'm hoping for. Let's get started with one of my biggest problems with this book, which is a central problem, actually, which is the character of Ella. To me, Ella was by far the most annoying character and self-righteous chick I have ever read about. And trust me, I've read quite a bit of books and quite a bit of books about people who are like this, and that's saying something. We meet her on a train being nosy, overhearing 2 young women's conversations and drawing some extremely heinous conclusions, all because they are talking to some slightly older boys. The issue that's talked about in the synopsis about her, them saying that they had been to jail, first of all, that is said super quickly towards the end of this entire conversation. And it's not revealed that they're in their 20s or 30s. They look about teenagers. The age was never revealed as well. She's assuming that these guys are so much older. Don't know why. Never figured that shit out. But we meet her on a train being nosy, overhearing the women's conversations. She then goes back and forth in her head if she should call up these 2 girls' mothers. Big problem. She does not know who they are or even if they are underage to begin with. She has a serious Karen complex of inserting herself in shit that has nothing to do with her. And if she said something, those girls rightfully would have laughed and went into the next car in the train. When the one girl goes missing, she makes it all about her and how she could have done more. May I mind you, the media doesn't think that. She doesn't get written up about being an evil person. Nobody's following her home. Nobody's blaming her for anything. There's a moment where the mother has a little bit of blame, but let's be honest, if your kid went missing, you'd blame anyone, right? So the world as a whole did not blame her. What I have no idea, and I don't know anymore, I don't understand this level of guilt over a 5-second interaction that she had, that she didn't even interact with the people. This was all her just watching. This book then follows her and her moments of pain when she receives a letter in the mail. A letter that is not scary or intimidating, but she grabs her pearls and panics. She was written in hopes of being sympathetic, I think, but to me, she was just a judgmental, middle-aged woman with way too much time on her hand and a level of self-importance that I still can't fully comprehend. This book goes off on so many tangents. I get confused one moment. We're coming to a head. One of the main characters is about to talk about how he's a suspect. And then all of a sudden, we begin talking about a fly on the wall in great detail. I actually counted. We talked about a damn fly for 5 minutes straight. Then later, we're dealing with another revelation. I'm getting excited, thinking, finally, here we go. And then we go off on another tangent, where we talk about all the different kind of flowers in Ella's damn flower shop for 10 pages. This book didn't know where to edit it in and what to throw away when editing started. They kept everything, and mostly to the detriment of the story. They made it longer in pages, but not in any real substance. Also, let's be honest, this is about a missing girl, Anna, at the root of it. And I don't care. They don't make me care for her, telling me anything about her and why this is such a horrible thing. Except, of course, she's a teenager. That's all I know. I don't know what she likes, her hopes, or her dreams. They don't even give proper descriptions of what she looks like. Also, another thing, the detectives in this book, oh my God, they were laughable. And some of the most inept police work was done in this book. I'm surprised a culprit was even found. Number 4, The Last Final Girl by Stephen Graham. I read this book in February of this year, and it came out in 2012. It's not that long, 286 pages. I have never read Stephen Graham before, but I have obviously heard of his works, and I was really interested in this because I am a huge horror fan. Love movies. I love horror movies. Scream is actually my favorite horror movie. Don't judge me. I was born in the 90s, and it's the first horror movie that I actually saw in theaters with my parents when I was a really young kid. And I have a very special connection to that and to other horror movies because I watched it with my father, who has now passed. And I was really excited for this. I thought, oh, blood, gore. It's going to be like 80s theme. The last girl surviving. It's going to be awesome. It was not awesome for me. I was really excited about the idea that it was going to be kind of in like movie format, and I thought this is going to be so cinematic. This is going to be great, and it was not. But you know what? Let's get to the synopsis and we'll go from there. Life in a slasher film is easy. You just have to know when to die. Aerial view, a suburban town in Texas. Everyone's got an automatic garage door opener. All the kids jump off a perilous cliff into a shallow river as a rite of passage. The sheriff is a local celebrity. You know this town. You're from this town. Zoom in. Homecoming princess Lindsay. She's just barely escaped death at the hands of a brutal, sadistic murderer in a Michael Jackson mask. Up on the cliff, she was rescued by a horse and bravely defeated the killer, alone, brawless. Her story is already a legend. She's this town's heroic final girl, their virgin angel. Monster vision, Halloween masks floating down that same river the kids jump into. But just as one slaughter is not enough for Billie Jean, our mask killer, one victory is not enough for Lindsay. Her high school is full of final girls, and she's not the only one who knows the rules of the game. When Lindsay chooses a host of virgins, misfits, and former final girls to replace the slaughtered members of her original homecoming court, it's not just a fight for survival. It's a fight to become the last final girl. Like I said, this is my first time reading from this author. I've heard wonderful things about some of his other works, and I'll be checking it out for sure no matter what. But this book gave me a headache more than once. I am a lover, like I said, of horror movies, so much in fact that I thought this book would be right up my alley. The cover of this book has a quote from Scream, for Christ's sake, which, like I already said, is my favorite horror movie. And alas, it did not inspire fear in my heart. It just made me wish the book would hurry up and end. This book is a 2-star read, with hopes and dreams of being a 5, but never doing much work to actually get there. This book is written in script format, like I said, which again, I was so excited for. But after about 5 pages in, I realized why more people don't write novels like this. Because it just doesn't work, and somehow takes away from the visual experience of reading, and does not at all help it, which is odd, I admit. It felt disjointed, and the dialogue, or its attempts at it, were so amateurish and not at all the horror trope it was trying to emulate. I saw moments where it had to be Scream or Halloween, but it didn't just fall flat, it missed the mark entirely. For a horror book to work, you have to, one, love the characters, or at least feel some connection to them, some desire to want them to live, or at least be the last one standing. There is no one to care about in this book. Not even the main character, who is a wannabe goth kid with no heart of gold, but a black mass where it should be. I was holding my breath, not to see who lived, but to see who died, and if it was worth having to deal with them this long. Also, in a horror book, as in movies, you need a plot, and this book had the bare minimum. And they tried to make a 286-page book out of an idea that could have fit on a cocktail napkin. Absolutely headache inducing. Also, its concept of how kids talk is not even remotely realistic. Scream did, in my personal opinion, a good job of making teens sound how they do, not so watered down and dumb, with before those movies most horror characters, let's be honest, they seem to be. But this makes all teens sound idiotic, or as if they have a horror encyclopedia in their back pocket, which I can say I've never seen from my teen relatives. Also, they expect me to believe that an entire town talks about nothing but 80s horror films when there are 20 years between most of these films. Teens were born. Bullshit. I have cousins that are 14, and I know for a fact they've never even seen Halloween or any of their friends. So I'm not going to hold my breath because this is far out of its reach. Also, I felt no tension throughout this book. People are supposed to be getting murdered. This is a horror book and marketed as such, and yet it takes over halfway before a body drops. And when it does, it happens so fast, I feel as a reader, you're almost unprepared or thinking you just walked in on a joke gone horribly, horribly wrong. This book is trying too hard to be Scream, and that alone makes me not like it for its lack of originality and trying to ride the coattails of an actual classic without having to do any work itself. The ending gave me a headache, and it wasn't original, but again, another copy of a better piece of work. Number 5. The Sisters Next Door by L.H. Stacy. I read this book February this year, and it was released in 2021. I'll be honest, I don't have much to say about this book. This is going to be a really short one in the series because this book didn't make me feel anything. I didn't like it. I didn't hate it beyond words. It was there. It was a complete dud. I felt like it barely made sense most of the time, and I more or less figured it out like maybe 20 pages into this book, so it didn't do it for me. But let's get this to the synopsis, and I'll tell you a little bit about what I thought about it. But mostly what I thought was, Okay. Sisters Molly and Beth Winters thought their remote clifftop house would be the perfect place to hide away after their mother's brutal murder. They were wrong, because someone from the girls' past has already found their safe house, and he is watching and waiting in the shadows, ready to make them pay. Their new home should have been the place the sisters were safe. But no place is safe forever, and danger could be closer than they think. Oh yeah, where do I go? This is a 1-star book, and probably, honestly, I hate to say it, my easiest 1-star I've given this year, because it's a book where nothing truly happens. Nothing. And the things that do happen, you see coming a mile away, including who did it. It's not a shock or something where there's any kind of payoff if you read all 280 pages. That boils down to a crazy relative that doesn't know how to leave well enough alone. Molly and Beth are sisters, or they're supposed to be, and I have no sisterly vibe between them. It's as if they're strangers stuck in a house together attempting to connect, but failing horribly because they don't actually know one another at all. At about the halfway point, still nothing happened in this book. I found myself slogging through this, hoping for a good twist, and there was none to be found. The amount of time I have to hear Molly crying made me want to reach through the book and hand the chick a tissue and tell her to suck it up. The writing is very juvenile in my opinion, and it was hard to feel connected to any of the characters. I felt the characters didn't even want to be in this book. The ending is as far of a reach as I can say. It doesn't make a bit of sense. I feel like the author I'm sorry, but I feel like the author was drunk when she wrote the end of this book. I actually hope so, because that would help me understand why it felt so off the already bent, twisted rails. And at least if there was alcohol involved, I could say at least she had a good time at the end. But alas, I do not believe there was alcohol involved. And this book, it just, like I said, it didn't do it for me. And I do not think I will be picking up anything more from this author because I didn't even find the writing interesting. I found it all very amateurish, so not a good read for me. Number 6, Shutter by Melissa Larson. I read this book April of this year and it was released June of 2021. Another book that honestly just it didn't really do it for me. I thought it was interesting, thought the premise was good. I was really into it, even probably until about the halfway part, and then it didn't just fall off the rails. It just landed with a hard thud. There was nothing there, and I actually found myself really annoyed with this book and the writing. But let's just do the synopsis and then we'll get more into it. A young woman agrees to star in a filmmaker's latest project, but soon realizes the movie is not what she is expecting in this chilling debut novel. In the wake of her father's death, Betty Rokes doesn't allow herself to mourn. Instead, she pushes away her mother, breaks up with her boyfriend, and leaves everything behind to move to New York City. She doesn't know what she wants, except to run. When she's offered the chance to play the leading role in mysterious indie filmmaker Anthony Marino's new project, she jumps at the opportunity. For a month, Betty will live in a cabin on a private island off the coast of Maine, with a 5-person cast and crew. Her mother warns against it, but Betty is too drawn to the charismatic Anthony to say no. Anthony gives her a new identity, Lola, and Betty tells herself that this is exactly what she's been looking for, the chance to reinvent herself. That is, until they begin filming, and she meets Sammy, the island's caretaker. And Betty realizes just how little she knows about the movie and its director. Honestly, this was a 2-star read that 100% deserved it for me. This was a book that had a really good plot, but I felt it just didn't know where to go with it. At about 50 pages in, I could tell I was in trouble. The characters were doing things that I couldn't understand, and there was no or very little motives for how people reacted and spoke to one another. Elizabeth leaves her hometown after a death of her father and is almost avoided for most of the story. And then at the end, there's a reveal that her father told her most of her life he would eventually kill himself, and she always felt responsible. And I couldn't understand why. When she said that she was so much love and respect for him, it was never discussed why her father would speak to her like that, and if he ever had any type of depression or mental illness. It was so out of the blue, and it took me out of the book. Also, you probably heard, I just said Elizabeth. Now, in the synopsis, they're talking about somebody named Betty. You come to find out very early on that Betty's real name is Elizabeth. So in this book, the character goes by Elizabeth, Betty, and then Lola. It's very confusing. I didn't understand why this had to happen 3 separate times. Why wasn't it Elizabeth and then just Betty? Okay, you want to change yourself, reinvent yourself, fine. But 3 times in a book that wasn't that long, I found myself very confused with who this character was. Even her name alone, I couldn't figure out. Sometimes I got very drawn out of it. So, a little too much for me. The reasoning for this whole movie is to upset one of the characters and put him on edge to harm someone. And I don't fully think the author fleshed out why. It's all about something that happened 15 years prior, and I just feel it was lacking in believability. Everything about this book actually was lacking 100% in believability. Elizabeth, aka Betty, aka Lola, was a horrible character to connect with because she honestly did. She had no sense of self, even her name. And even at the end, she hadn't grown or stood up for herself once. It's like seeing a sullen child stamping their foot and pouting and getting rewarded with whatever she wants. She was flawed, but even those flaws were glossed over and not explored, which would have made her far more interesting. Elizabeth's relationship with her best friend Sophia was one of the most strained, confusing friendships I've read in a very long time. The tension is all manufactured in this book. So when it happens, I don't feel shocked. I just feel like it's all planned. So nothing surprises me or gives me any real thriller vibes. Hidden camera angle is going to be a found footage, but is too low tech with bad planning for it to be anything else but a bad reality TV show. The ending was out there, and not in anything interesting, just out there, as in, did I witness a psychotic break? Because that's the only way it would honestly make any sense. Number 7, They All Fall Down by Rachel Housel Hall. I read this book July of this year, and it was released in 2019, and there's 309 pages. Now, before we even go into the synopsis, I've read from this author before. I actually read from this author earlier this year, These Toxic Things, and I actually really loved that book, so much to the point that I went on my Kindle and immediately bought another book. Now, I heard some not so savory reviews about this, but I said, you know what, I don't judge, let me see it for myself. It's very compared to Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. As you will find out in the series, I am a huge Agatha Christie fan, always have been, and Then There Were None is a favorite of mine, actually. So I thought, okay, a retelling, they do that a lot. A lot of books I enjoy have that retelling, and if it's done well, it's done well. This, however, was not done well at all. Let's get to the synopsis, and then we can go from there. It was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime. Delighted by a surprise invitation, Miriam Macy sails off to a luxurious private island off the coast of Mexico with 6 other strangers. Surrounded by miles of open water in the gloriously green sea of Cortez, Miriam is soon shocked to discover that she and the rest of her companions have been brought to the remote island under false pretenses, and all 7 strangers harbor a secret. Danger lurks in the lush forests and in the halls and bedrooms of the lonely mansion. Sporadic cell phone coverage and miles of ocean keeps the group trapped in paradise, and strange accidents stir suspicions as one by one they all fall down. This is a 1 star for attempting to remake Agatha Christie And Then There Was None, and seeing such a work of art and turning a finger painting in and saying it's the same thing, not understanding how to compare without destroying what you're trying to nod to. It was I really hated this so much. I am a huge fan of books that do have a nod, like I said, to the Agatha Christie books, And Then There Were None. But to do that, you have to be interested in the writing and what these people are guilty of. And I was so very uninterested, and the way these characters interacted with one another did not build tension, which is what And Then There Were None did, but instead reminded me of a bunch of kids stuck at a summer camp, pissed off that it's raining outside. This was poorly written, which honestly, it's such a shame because I have read from this author before and liked her book, actually loved her book. So I'm going to assume that maybe with this she was under a deadline, and that's why this lacked so much in character development and realistic dialogue, because her other book, 100% opposite of this. I was also shocked, honestly, with how racially insensitive this book was. I mean, I kept coming across stuff that wasn't just making me uncomfortable, but was outright pissing me off for how they were discussing other races and ethnicities. I hated it. It's personal opinion. Like I said, just personal opinion here. This is a very strong opinion. This is a waste of paper it was written on. If you're gonna read And Then There Were None retelling, at least read the actual book it's copying. And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. I can promise you a much better time will be had. Just read that book. Just do that. It's better. Trust me. Number 8, The Long Weekend by Gilly Macmillan. I read this book. This is actually my most recent bad star book. I actually read this in July of this year, and this was released March in 2022. Chew, and it's 350 pages. I thought I was going to like this book. Again, excited for this book. Spent $15 on Kindle for this goddamn book. I was super excited. And it, I really, really, really hated it. I was going to say disliked it, but I'm not going to lie to you. Why lie? Why start now? I hated it. Sorry, just did. But let's get to the synopsis and then we can get into why and how much I hated it. 3 couples, 2 bodies, 1 secret. Darkfell Barn is a perfectly isolated retreat, or so it says on its website, when Jane books a reservation for her friends. A quiet place, far removed from the rest of the world. It's exactly what they need. The women arrive for a girls' night ahead of their husbands. Their ex-Army Jane, hardened and serious, but also damaged. Ruth, the driven doctor and new mother who is battling demons of her own. Young Emily, just wed and insecure, the newest addition of their tight-knit band. Missing this year is Edie, who was the glue that held them all together until her husband died suddenly. But what they hoped would be a relaxing break soon turns to horror. Upon arrival at Darkfell Barn, the women find a devastating note claiming one of their husbands will be murdered. There are no phones, no call service to check on their men. Friendships fracture as the situation spins wildly out of control. Betrayal can come in many forms. This group has kept each other's secrets for far too long. Unfortunately, yet again, the last one in this list is a 1-star read for me. I actually finished this not so long ago, like I said, and I had high hopes for this book, and I'm sad to see it on this list, but I have to be honest, and it was not good. At least not for me. This book is told in multiple POVs, which normally I love, but this book is also told in parts. 3 parts in total. So one moment you're reading about how Ruth is feeling, and with no time to settle in, you're looking at something happening to Imogen. And it took me out of the book, having that happen so many times, one after the other. A book of this size, I wish it would have been chapter style instead of these 3 parts, because I found it really dragging, and I wonder if some of it was because the parts are just long, sometimes even pointless. They're supposed to be friends, these women, right? And I have absolutely no vibe that anyone even likes one another or even knows one another at all, which is off for me. Where were these women for most of the book? And I never feel a connection between any of them. And I really just didn't like this book. And I genuinely do. Even as I'm saying it, I feel bad that I didn't like it because I was actually really excited to read this. I couldn't connect with any of the characters. I found them all dull. They were all dull, except for Imogen, who I just found a damn idiot. Oh my god, she was one of the dumbest characters. I wanted to friggin' shake her ass. She knows, okay, at some point towards the end of this novel, spoiler, big time spoiler here, she knows she's getting drugged and feeling unsafe, being chased down and hauled into a house. And when she's finally alone, does she try to flee? No! That happens twice. Once with the car, and I just screamed at the absolute stupidity of this woman, this 17-year-old girl. Let me classify. She's not a grown woman. She's a teenager. But let me tell you, when I was a teenager, I wasn't dumb like this. If somebody was trying to attack me and hurt me and they were dumb enough, hopefully they would have been, to leave me alone, the second I knew they were gone, I'd be out of there. I wouldn't be staying there and pretend that everything's all hunky-dory. Oh no, out I go. I've seen way too many horror movies. Nope, no thank you. We also found out who the killer is really early and why they were doing it. And I still had to get through, after that revelation, 70 pages. And I felt like it was just never going to end. It's just sad how much of a letdown this book was to me. Because it was a really long weekend away. And honestly, if I was invited to this, I just wouldn't have showed up. So guys, that's the list. Again, I just want to say, I'm really sorry if any of these books that you liked were on here, but this is my opinions. That's all. I look forward to hearing from you guys in the comments. Let me know what are some of the books in 2022 that have disappointed you this year, and if any ones I mentioned are the same as you. I hope you guys have a good time listening to my rant on what I wish was good, but ended up disappointing me. I have some fun ideas for my next podcast. I'm thinking about doing a shorter one next time about my favorite all-time authors. Some that might surprise you, others that after this and the last video probably won't, because I've mentioned some already here. I can't wait to talk to you guys soon. This is Megan Reads, hoping to find you next time. Happy, healthy, and of course, reading.